Welcome to Mondo Street Social Club's Project Hush. In this special series, we talk to past guests about the impact of mental health on their lives and creativity.
Hello and welcome to the final episode of Project Hush from Mondo Street Social Club. We're joined by Chris Tetreault-Blay, who comes back to the podcast to talk about his mental health, how that's affected his creativity. Chris, you may remember, is an author and a wrestling fan. So without further ado, let's hear from Chris. Hi, Chris. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you, mate. Thank you so much for asking me to come back on. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
Yeah, and always a pleasure to touch base with you. Before we start, Chris, and talk about what Project Hush is for, I just wanted to offer my congratulations on the It's a Long Way to the Moon being an audio book now on Spotify, and just how much I enjoyed it.
Oh, really? Oh, thank you. Bless you for saying that. Yeah,
it was fantastic.
Thank you. I see the audiobook, it has been out. I got that done not long after it was published. So it's published in 2019, I think.
Right, okay.
I think, 2019, 2020. It's been out a few years. And I got the audiobook done shortly after it was published. So it's been out there on other platforms. Yeah. But as soon as I knew that the platform Findaway Voices that I've actually sort of published it through were teaming up with Spotify, I was just been waiting, because, for me, I don't, the money side has never really bothered me too much. Anyway, I don't do this for the money, but it's the exposure. It's the fact that it's out there on a platform like that. I was so happy, and I just when I got the email from them to say we've now done this, I went straight on there to have a look. Am I on it? Yeah, my kids are really excited. So
and as an independent reviewer, I've got to say it's irrespective of the listener's age, it's just a bloody good story.
Thank you.
So hats off to you, mate. So happy that you got there.
Yeah.
So off to Project Hush then. So I think we touched first time that we spoke. We touched about a little bit on mental health issues, and we've both been through the ringer a bit ourselves. How are you doing now? Are you in a place where you can look back and get some perspective on what you've been through?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a certain amount of time. I count this from when I was first diagnosed, I suppose, which was about 10 years ago. I think it's gone on for a lot longer before that, but that was at the point that I actually, it had a name for me. But no, absolutely. I've had 2 quite bad bouts within that period of time, but I'm quite far removed in a way from that now. And I think each time I've gone through it, it's taught me something different about myself. By all means, I'm not fixed. I don't think anyone who goes through this truly is. I think you'd be naive to kind of think that you'll ever be clear of it. But definitely I can think and talk about it a lot better because I think I see it a lot clearer now, and it's been, I would say, 3 years now since my last sort of bad bout where, everything was kind of crashing down. So, it takes time, but no, everything, not exactly rosy, but I'm coping a lot better, and I can go, day to day knowing I'm all right, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So when you look back over the past 3 years since your last bout, do you recognize triggers? Do you recognize what was pushing you that way?
It was work. For a big thing for me was, so if I rewind right back to when I first sort of was diagnosed, firstly it's anxiety and depression, which I know a lot of people struggle with. It was I think social anxiety is my sort of main area that I really struggle with. And it was 2013, and there was a trigger back then. Like I said, I think it was something that was always in me anyway for a number of years, but there was a trigger. There was some personal stuff that went down to do with my parents. They split up when I was younger, when I was like 7. So this is, let me think, where was I? 20, I was coming up 30, 29. And I was learning, I happened to learn more about their breakup than I knew before. And it kind of, I remember that point, I remember that day that I found that out. And I think over those next sort of 3 months, I just ended up taking a bit of a spiral, and I didn't really know what was going on. It took my wife as ever to be the one to turn around and say, you need to talk to someone. I can't help you. Which may sound harsh, but she struggles with this as well, and she knows her limit. And she knew she couldn't really do enough for me. So that's at the point 2013 that I went and I sought medical help, and I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, quite bad depression at the time. And I went through medication. I went through CBT.
Yeah.
So I count. Okay, that's the starting point of when I was aware of it. There's been 2 bouts since that. The last one in 2020. I should rewind a few years before that. My really bad bout was in 2018. It was completely work related, and I think it was the same in 2020. I was in the same job. And I have always struggled with taking on too much on myself, and I think I was in the worst possible job. I was told not to go into. I was working in the parcels industry, and I'd done it before. I knew how stressful it was. I'd gone back in there against other people's advice because I thought, it's different this time. I won't let it get to me.
Yeah.
And it took everything from me. There was no work-life balance. I was stressed out of my tree. I couldn't sleep. So both times the trigger has been that. And 2020, before it got too bad, I left that job.
Right.
I had nothing else to go to. It had got so bad that even my wife was like, we need to get you out. Just leave. Because we knew where it was going and I couldn't afford to go back there. So I was like, I'm going to do something different. 2020 was rough for us all, let's be honest. As well as COVID. I could be quite open. I had a couple of other health issues happen that year as well. I lost someone I knew. My boss died of COVID. And this was all within the span of a few months. So between April and July that year, I went through all of that. I got diagnosed with Lyme's disease as well, which really affected my health and, just my ability to cope with anything. I then got made redundant. Well, I was at risk of being made redundant. The company I was with made the position I was in compliance. They made the entire department redundant, put me back in the job that put me in the dark place in the first place. So again, I had no other choice then. I had to take that because that was all that I had. I couldn't land, I had mortgage, I had kids. I couldn't come away from it in my head. 3 weeks I lasted in that role. And then I was in my local depot that I was managing at the time. And just things were just going wrong left, right and centre. And it was the one point then I picked up the phone to my boss and I was like, I can't do this. Basically, I'm going to have to go back to the doctor. And then he was the one that said, you need to consider whether this is right for you, full stop. And that was it. And I think the trigger for me was work, but the way of coming out of it was being able to make that decision, having the support to make that decision to just leave without having... Yes, I got cushioned because I was still able to get my redundancy money. So it gave me a bit of breathing room, which not a lot of people have that luxury, but I needed that. And once I was away from it, it was massive weight. Just feel it, Before the stress kicked in about what am I going to do now, just knowing I was free of that, it just lightened immediately.
It's a environmental stress is a terrible thing because it does box you in.
It really does.
And I think that when you've had an episode of anxiety or stress or depression previously in your life, you do lose that ability to measure what you're capable of.
Yeah.
So going back into that field or being pushed back into that field, you feel you can cope because you've got through it once, but actually you're a little bit more susceptible at that point. I
went through a bit of both because it was kind of like, yes, I went through that. I'd like justifying to myself because I thought, this is the only, I've got to go back into this role. This is all I've got. I can't afford to not take it. So I'm convincing myself, convincing my wife, it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Knowing it wouldn't be. And I think then on the flip side, once I was in there, knowing the restrictions almost, or knowing my my triggers, my not my barriers, my limits. That was the most important thing, is I already knew that. So as soon as I felt it go wrong, I was like, I know what I need to do. I just, you then feel like you can't make that decision. You have to make it work. But knowing it hadn't, the first time around, it made the decision easier, I suppose. But it was noticing it when I reached that limit. That was important. That was a really important thing. I didn't know that the first time around, 2018, I completely fell apart. It was out of nowhere. I'm just trying to think. Again, I can usually remember these things. I think I was driving. I'm based in Newton Abbot, down South Devon. My local depot that I was based under was Bridgewater, which is about an hour away. Something had happened. The job I had with the parcels company I was with, National Parcels Company. I'm not going to name them. Their reputation is bad enough as it is. But it was, basically you manage location, all the couriers within it, and things that go wrong. If there's rounds that go down, you have to do everything you can to cover them. And I think that was really getting on top of me in terms of, I can't do anymore, but I'm still expected to do more. What can I do? What are they expecting of me? I was driving to Bridgewater one day, and I couldn't do it. I got there, I was sweating, I was shaking. My boss pulled me to one side and was like, "What's going on?" And I just spilled it, basically, as much as I could. I was like, I can't do this. He sent me home. I was off for 2 months, away from work. Complete break kind of did me good. Again, it took him to say, because he says, "Why are you here? Why are you not off getting, seeing the doctor?" I said, "Because I only get a few weeks sick leave. I can't do it." That is the attitude I think we can all take. We want to get help, but there's a reason why we can't.
Yeah, and we can always find a reason.
Exactly. So it didn't take much. Then it took him turning around and saying, "You do realise you've got this amount per year that you can take." And I was like, "Right, fair enough. Consider me off. I need to get myself sorted." So I was off for 2 months and did all the second time around. I did the medication. I did the CBT. But I knew I had to go back. That was the big thing. It was then came to the end, towards the end of that, when I knew I had to come back. And they were going to help me. They said, "What do you need from us?" My boss came to my house along with a member of HR. "What do you need us to do?" So I was like, "Right, if I come back, I need it to be staggered. I need it to be gentle. I can't just launch back in." They set out a return to work, a staggered return to work, a phased return. That's it, phased return, which lasted all of about a week.
Yeah,
and again, that was a bit of knowledge I needed when it happened again a couple of years later. I knew they weren't going to be able to help me, or they weren't going to be willing to help me properly. So you learn a lot from every time that you go through. And I think it took that time before of giving me the knowledge of what I needed to do the following time, really. And
that last night or the last weekend before you were due to go back to work must have been awful for you, because you must have been ramping yourself right up to that first trip back into work.
Yeah, it was difficult because I think along that time, about a week before, it was my sister-in-law's wedding. So it was great. I was getting towards the end of my time off. I was relaxed. Yes, I was medicated, so that was helping. But the fact that I hadn't had any of the stress around me, and then we had that joyous occasion at the end, it was a real mix of emotions, because I was like on a high, trying not to think about work. But immediately after that, you've got, okay, there's nothing in between this now. And I had to drive to Bridgewater. I had to drive an hour again to have my return to work. Even then, I could feel I was lying when he said, "Are you ready?" I'd already done this once. I tried going back after a month, had my return to work, got straight up there. And again, I was just shaking, and he was like, "You're not ready." I was like, "No, I'm not." But I thought I had to. I feel I have to. And I fell on that again, but I thought, I can't do this now. I need to just, almost like ripping a Band-Aid off, the whole cliche. I need to just do it and get back into it. Once I'm into it, I think I'll probably be okay. A few months later, I got offered a different position that took me out of that role into compliance, which is what I work in now. It's what I actually really enjoy. It's what I'm comfortable doing. It took me away from that direct responsibility for all of these problems when they occur, because I I had a role within them, but it wasn't my responsibility to deal with them. Which is when a couple of years later, when they took that job away, that is when it started, because they took away my safety net. That's my bubble, my comfort blanket, whatever you want to class it as. They took that away. And
it just plonks you onto a tightrope, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
That level footing that you felt that you had, that comfort blanket, like you said, with that level footing, that stability goes away, and then you're back on the old wobble board, and you can feel your mind starting to move away, starting to think about what's happened previously, and then
absolutely,
it's house of cards.
It is, and it's a curse and a blessing at the same time to have had that experience, because you almost you're waiting for this to happen again. But you can foresee when it is, or you can recognize when it is. If it's already started, okay, how, and hopefully got a bit of a better idea of how to cope with it. By then, that's what all my therapy was about, was coping techniques. And the first time round in 2013, I thought it was a load of old rubbish, because I went through all the sessions, and I tell you what, in my head, I knew. Again, I think a lot of people can figure this out anyway when they're in these situations, but I did a degree in psychology, so I knew almost how I had to act and what I had to say to convince people I was all right. And I knew I had I think it was a 3-month program, and I knew when my end date was, and I was like, I'm going to guarantee myself that is going to be my end date. It all sounded very good, that I was determined to reach that point, but in my head I was like, whatever I feel like, I'm going to make that my last one. I'm going to make people think that I'm all right.
That's classic masking, isn't it? It's I'm broken on the inside, but I want you to see me as normal. Exactly. I don't. Please don't recognize any weakness in me, because we need to be father, husband, provider.
And this is it. And I'm not going to say, I'll probably get crucified for saying this, but I think it's inherent in us naturally as men that we feel like we cannot say these things. We're not allowed. We're meant to be the ones who are meant to be there, be the rock for our family base. If we're feeling it, my wife is sort of the opposite to that almost. She does struggle with the same things as me, but she openly will say, I will not give in to this. So through this, I've been trying to kind of go back and be her support as well, while trying to fix myself.
It's funny how men, consciously, subconsciously, always put themselves in that position of being the rock within the family, when everybody knows it's the woman.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was going to say that.
It's one of those silly things that men convince themselves of. I'm the rock of this family.
And it's been
it's always
going back eons. I think it's always been that way, and we've just been conditioned to.
Well, I think the ladies are kind enough to let us think that way.
That is it, because I think sometimes it's all we've got. That's a full background.
Massaging our ego, aren't they? Yeah. Best put Mr. Grumpy back in his chair. So, have you ever? And I've had this, and I've discussed this previously. But when you have a gap or a period of remission, do you ever miss how you felt when you were ill? Because that was part of you, part of your internal identity.
That's a good question. Yeah, I think I have to admit, yes, I have.
Yeah.
I think it's. I'm not going to say it's euphoric or anything like that, but it's the moment when you have admitted there is something wrong, and you seek that help, even if it's just talking to someone. You're not actively going out and contacting the doctor yourself. You're making someone aware of, I have a problem. I need help. Please recognize this for me, so you can help. Once that happens, it is just this. That weight is lifted immediately, not fully, but at least enough for you to say, okay, I've done the hardest bit. So sometimes, even now, if I feel myself, I'm a lot better than I was. I suppose I do miss the fact of sometimes not just wanting to give into it, but there is, letting people know there is a reason why I act a certain way in certain situations. Don't think it's me being either awkward or rude or anything like that. There is a reason for it. And I think during the stages of when you openly admit that you've got this issue, a lot more people around you pick up on that than you realise, and they do treat you a bit differently. And I think, sometimes that's the only real element I think that I miss is just that recognition of if I'm feeling really tight on something and it's affecting my behaviour, it's just the world around me knowing that's the reason for it. It'll pass.
Maybe we should have badges or specific coloured lights that sit on our shoulders.
I think so.
So something just strange like that. It's.
I think we'd all have them though, wouldn't we? We'd all have them because I think
everybody has.
Yeah.
Everybody has moments in their lives where things become too much, or they lose the focus or the ability to deal with things, and it's you've hit the nail on the head already. It is about discussing this. It's about whether it's over a beer with your best mate or over a curry with your missus. It's trying to talk to as many people because everybody has it. We've got to get over this thing about feeling embarrassed, and feeling shame, and it's very easy to say that, but it's something we've got to practice because, if we don't say it, people will assume we're just being grumpy or quiet, and it goes way deeper than that.
It does, and not all of us are going to react the same way. It's not going to come out in the same behaviors in everyone. If someone close to you, they see you act a certain way or do certain specific things, unless you say something, they're not going to put two and two together. It doesn't set a beacon off saying this is my anxiety or this is my depression. It took something fairly specific for this discussion to take place with myself and my wife, and for her to even suggest that I needed to see someone. If that hadn't have happened, then it would, I would have kept on for months. It would have happened at some point, but I would have kept on for months and months and months trying to make excuses for why I acted like I was. I was incredibly moody. I couldn't put a nail on it. I was being horrible as a person. Thankfully, my kids weren't around at the time, because I think the thing that I was really guilty of the second time around is they had, not physically, they may have taken the brunt of it kind of emotionally, because that's how it comes out in me, it's almost like irrational anger, frustration. I just don't become very nice. And back when we didn't know what that was, there were other things that were being read into it that weren't true. And it's then, people, they're not good unless you crack that egg open and start looking inside. People around you aren't going to know, and at least now she's been there and she can sort of sense when these things were happening again. So mine manifested itself in exactly the same way. I've become fairly unpleasant, moody, aggressive, unpleasant to be around, and I went for many years not knowing what that was. It's horrible.
And not being able to put two and two together, because like you said, you make excuses. You say, well, I had a bad day in work, so that's why I'm grumpy. Or my football team lost, that's why I'm grumpy. And I can't go to the doctor because I can't get an appointment, so it'll wash over me, I'll be fine.
So excuses, it's the classic one is they won't listen to me, they won't think it's important enough, I'll be wasting their time. It's the worst thing you can say, worst thing you can think. It
is the worst thing. We know it's very difficult at the moment to access mental health services, but it's still something that people should try. You've got to get on the pathway, and you've got to go through the hoops to get to the end result. Not doing it because it takes a long time to do it. It's doing yourself a disservice. It's actually going to make yourself sicker.
Of course it is. It is. Don't feel that we all think we're admitting a weakness. And it is. It's a weakness in your health. You need to take care of that,
And the transverse is that, yes, it's a weakness in your health, but it's a strength in you to actually talk about it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So anybody that puts their hand up and says, I'm not okay, in my books is a bit of a hero.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there.
So how did it affect your writing then? Because I know we spoke about A Long Way to the Moon, and that is it is a very light piece.
Yeah.
You know, it's a children's story. It's very upbeat. It's very jolly. But some of your other work isn't as jolly as that.
And this is it. This is what's interesting, because you can pretty much predict where I was, and it's as clear as that. So right at the beginning, the time I started writing, properly, writing my fiction, writing my horror, 2013.
Yeah,
there you go. There you go. There was a lot of stuff happening then. So I mean, this didn't help as well. So I think it was April, May time that I finally sort of recognized it and got myself to the doctor. June of that year, we bought our first house. September that year, my wife found out she was pregnant.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot. So I started. I think this is early. She found out early September that year, and it's as soon as sort of 2 weeks later, I was starting to write stuff down for the first time.
Wow.
It started off. I think I mentioned last time. I started off with messing around with song lyrics and stuff. I was messing around with trying to put some words on paper, but they weren't going anywhere. This was the point at which I started to turn my attention elsewhere. So by the point that she found out she was expecting, I had gone through my treatment. I'd come out the other end. I was feeling better, a sense of achievement that I had done that. Again, the medication was really helping leveling me out. But that is when I started writing, because it was like, it wasn't a conscious decision like, this is going to be therapeutic.
Yeah.
I need to do this. I started doing it and immediately felt a sense of release. So that is why and how I was able to then write my first 3 or 4 books within the space of 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
Because I was constantly, I had a routine. I knew when I was going to do it. I knew how much I wanted to achieve. I had a clear idea. All these stories were just coming to me. The nature of them was pulling on the dark place that I had been to. I may have not been quite as deep in it then, but I had the experience. I had these thoughts that I could pull on. So it was a sense of inspiration for that. And that went through to my spell in 2018. I didn't do a lot of writing while I was off work. During that time, I felt I actually fell headlong into reading. I read the entire time. That is when I discovered Steve Alton's Meg series. Again, completely unrelated to what I was going through, but that was exactly it. It gave me that distraction.
Yeah.
But I feel my writing during that period had helped at least draw. It was like, it's like bloodletting, isn't it? I think it's just like just turning the tap on, letting some of this run out into something creative, something a bit more productive. When I then came around when I kind of got clear of a lot of this, 2019, I was doing quite well. I was in this other position, with the company I was with. I was enjoying work to a certain degree again. It wasn't getting to me like it was. I didn't have the triggers. So my mood was a lot lighter. My outlook was a lot more positive, which is then where I started to get, I less of the horror was coming through and more of the kind of, I was definitely picking up on more of what brought me joy. So reading stories to my kids was what I really enjoyed doing. That's where It's a Long Way to the Moon manifested.
Yeah.
I was just in that good place. Step forward again, I tried going back to horror in late 2019. Anyone out there who knows NaNoWriMo or NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, happens November every year. It's for anyone who doesn't know, it's a month-long challenge where anyone can do it. Anyone who wants to write, even if you've never written anything before, you set yourself a challenge of writing 50,000 words in a month.
Okay.
So it equates to about 1,666 words, I think, a day.
Yeah.
So fairly achievable if you're disciplined. 2019, so I wrote my first book during NaNoWriMo 2014. That's what helped me finish that. I thought I'd give it another go. 2019, I'll go back to horror. And a story came through. I didn't meet this challenge. I didn't do it in November. It took me a good few months into 2020 to have anything, even half a book. And then the pandemic arrived. And obviously 2020, the wheels started coming off again.
Yeah.
And I abandoned it. And even to this day, I haven't written another word on that book.
Wow.
I've actually posted out today that I've enrolled myself in NaNoWriMo 2023 for this year, and my challenge is to finish that book, because I kind of feel like now I can't let I'm past all of that was going on now. I'm in a much better place.
Yeah.
The challenge now is to put myself back in that place, but not because I emotionally belong there, but because creatively I can step back in there, do what I need to do, and then step back out. In theory, I'm in a stronger place that I can now differentiate the two. So this will be the first time I try to write in horror, where anyone who's had any kind of addiction, they consider themselves clean and sober. This is kind of where I'm feeling like I am now in terms of my mental health problems.
Wow.
Again, I said at the top, not all gone, but I'm coping a lot better with it. And this is the first time I would have gone back to horror in this stage. So it's going to be interesting to see how it affects, really, because I've always been reliant on having that darkness around me.
Yeah. I think it's quite brave, actually, because I did, not to your standard at all, but I had a really bad bout in 2018, and I did some, it's more than probably stream of consciousness. Some writing then.
Cool.
And I came across some of it the other day. I used to revisit it every couple of months, and then obviously it was opening up wounds. So I thought, well, I'll put it away. And I came across some of it the other day, and I was absolutely gobsmacked by, one, some of it was actually okay. But two, it was just so bloody raw. It was like, oh my God.
And
I think you're quite brave. I hope that doesn't come across as
no.
I think it's brave of you to go back into what could quite easily be seen as a the Book of the Dead in Evil Dead. You're going to open it and what comes out.
Exactly.
What comes out of it. So
I've been re-editing. I've over sort of last few months I've been trying to get. I've written my original horror trilogy, The World of Apocalypse. The third and final book that I had written was released about 6 years ago. I had a bad sort of launch with the publisher. It was really anticlimactic for the amount, how proud I felt of that book and the trilogy, and it ruined it for me. So over the last few months, I've been gone back and I've reread the whole trilogy, because I've been re-editing it, ready to, I've re-released them all myself, self-publishing. So I've reconnected with that stuff. And I feel like I've read it, I've experienced it, I've survived it. I'm not feeling a pull towards any of the place I was when I wrote it. So I feel like that's the differentiation now, is if they're words on a page that come from somewhere, but I'm not there anymore. I'm reading it as a reader now, rather than the writer. So this new one, I've got to read the half that I've already written as a reader. But then I've got to try and tap into enough of it to then finish the second half of it. So you could end up with a book that is completely different.
Because you must see when you're editing the trilogy or reading the first half of the new one, your style must be different. Because the way your brain is working.
That is it. I think you touched on your writing that you did there, and some of it being really good and some of it being really raw. I think what I do appreciate from that then is the clarity. I didn't have to. There was no great effort in getting these words out. They were coming from somewhere. I just had to let them flow, and I had to be there to capture them. So I do respect that it gave me that, and whatever it is that those books represent, it may be different than where I am now, but they represent where I was. And it's like getting a tattoo. It's the same thing. Whenever I get a new tattoo, it's like that's where I am now. So the second half of this book will be quite telling. I feel in how easy it's going to be for me to put myself back in there without physically being there, mentally being there. But hopefully, I will have enough inspiration from that, from a literary point of view rather than a literal point of view. To experience it.
Spot the writer. That was a really nice turn there. Well done. You're just showing off there.
No. They come to me at times.
Copyright that one.
Quite often these notes are genius. I'm never there to put them on a page.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Unfortunately, it was on my podcast, mate, so I've got it now.
You have it. It's fine.
Yeah. Oh God. So have you any plans? Because listening to audiobooks for me, I get really, really engrossed in the story.
Yeah.
And I know that the Long Way to the Moon is only 6.5 minutes long.
Yes. Yeah.
But you really get pulled in.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Can we have some audiobooks of your horror as well?
You can. There is one out there.
Oh,
So it's not out on Spotify yet. I'm actually, I'm now that I know that Spotify are now doing the audiobooks, I'm looking into how I can not move it because it's on Amazon, so it's got a very good platform. Anyway, I'm trying to figure out whether you can do both. So A Necessary End is the horror book that I've had done a few years ago. A great guy, very talented voice actor and musician as well, called Dave Jackson. He did a fantastic job. And A Necessary End is probably personally my favourite book that I've written. It's where I was having the most fun with my writing. I was just literally letting all of this really kind of gnarly, quite horrific stuff come out, but there's a bit of humour in there as well. I think it's a fantastic, it's my nod really to all of the horror movies that I know and love. The real kind of cheesy monster ones, the B movies and stuff like that. So that is out there. You can get that. You can find it on Amazon, on Audible. I have already. It's been a couple of years, probably 18 months or a couple of years since I spoke to Dave, but I did say to him that he's got the first refusal on my Wildemore Apocalypse books.
Wow. Brilliant.
When they were in a position that I had them out fully in print form and I was ready to put them out there, I would give them to him. So I'm now at that stage. So it takes for me now to get in touch with him. I'm hoping to have the Wildemore books out there as audiobooks at some point.
That's really exciting. That is really great stuff, because I suppose it allows a wider audience to consume your books, which it
really does. I'm beyond worrying about making money off of this at all. Not that I'll be out there on the street giving it away. I'd like people to go and buy them. But when I first got my first offer of a publishing contract for my first book, Acolyte, I had plans in my head. I was going to be able to give up work. I was going to do this. They'll be able to give me a multi-book deal. It doesn't happen. No. Sorry. So for me, if the audiobooks is, I was late in discovering audiobooks for myself. The beauty of them, it's what led me to podcasting, really, because it was like my job at the time needed me to. I was in the car, so I was listening more than I was reading anything. And even stories I knew took on a new dimension when they're in audiobook form. So I was so pleased when I got my books out there. The next step is utilizing a platform like Spotify that for a lot of people, I'm a premium member because we've got family, they all listen to Spotify. I think there's so many people with the right access to Spotify, they'll get the audiobooks. They don't have to pay any extra for them, but my story will be out there. So that's really that's a big thing for me to try and capitalize on that.
A shout out to one of my favorite audiobooks is the audiobook of Thinner by Stephen King.
Oh, okay.
Read by Paul Sorvino, who was in Goodfellas.
Oh, okay.
American Italian actor. You'll recognize him. His read of the book is fantastic. And that was when I got into audiobooks.
It's cool, yeah.
And I think it was 4 cassettes. So that's showing my age,
I didn't want to say it, mate, but wow.
Yeah.
You discovered them a lot earlier than I did.
So. Or was it 278? So can't quite remember.
I did have my first one on CD, I will say that. So before I had Spotify or anything, I had a couple of James Herbert ones. One of the Red Rats, but it was one of the later ones in that trilogy I had on CD. So
particularly unpleasant book, that the Rats.
It is a bit.
Yeah.
But if anyone out there does like James Herbert's style, the Britishness of it, the directness of it is what really pulled me into him. I would say A Necessary End is the one book that most people have compared to him. He was my biggest sort of hero from a literary point of view. And I'm hoping that comes through in that without becoming a rip-off. I love that.
Well, that's my next audiobook sorted. Thank you very much. So what else then? I'm immensely happy that you are in a much better place now, and I'm immensely proud of you that you've been through all of that and you've come out the other end, and you know, you're still productive and you're still you. So that's fantastic. What else have you got What else have you got going on?
Wow. So creative.
Yeah. So
Obviously not speech.
Yeah.
Not speech.
It's spreading like wildfire.
Creatively. So I mean, the big thing that I've been celebrating recently is a couple of days ago I finally got the third book in the Wilderness Apocalypse series of Gods and Insects. Is back available again for the first time in about 6 years. So that was a big thing. Although it's not a brand new release, I've gone through, I've made it stronger. It's my own. It's got my logo on it. It's my imprint. Dead Men's Tales Publishing is on the book. So that's come out. In terms of going forward, my next book, Poison in the Well, is the follow-on to that trilogy. That's the one I'll be working on through NaNoWriMo. Hopefully I'll have it, if I'm successful and complete it in November, it'll be out early next year. My other side, my podcasting side as well, that's kind of not dropping. I do a regular, it's going to take a bit of a break now, but I do a regular British Touring Car Championship relating podcast called Reverse Grid. But I've got a brand new podcast project coming up. I can't say too much on it at the minute because we've not got together yet to do any of the recording. We've agreed. It's myself and another author that I met through my podcast, Dead Men Talk.
Fantastic.
So if you go back through the latest batch of episodes I've released this year, there is one author in there that we hit it off so well that we, straight after the episode, we were like, we need to do this. And it's sort of like, it's a topic I've never touched on before. We decided it's going to be quite a niche one, but it's exciting. Stay tuned. I can't say too much until we actually start.
Well, when you can say something about it, come back on.
I will.
Or if you're accepting guests, give us a shout.
There we go. If you fall, if I'll let you know what it is off air, and then if it's something of interest, absolutely,
yeah, fantastic. Well, Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I truly appreciate your openness and your your energy on this. You know, it's a very important subject. So
I think this is the big thing I've learned from this is if you can talk about it. It wasn't until I started opening up about it that I found it. You know, to begin with, it's not going to happen straight away. It took me a good few years. I think it took me kind of getting to this point of knowing I've been through it. I've built up my, not resistance, but my awareness of it enough that I was like, I know when I need to back away from certain things. I know what my triggers are. I know what my limits are. And I can see the positive that comes from it. And I think once you reach that stage, there are people out there that, you know, you may not know it, but they'll relate to you and whatever's troubling you, whatever condition it is that you've got. There's so many people out there that relate to it, and they really benefit from hearing people talk and how you are doing. You know, even if you don't think you're in a good place, that is going to be inspiration to someone.
Totally. And sharing your limits and your triggers with those around you who are your support network will help them identify those issues for you as well. So it's all very good stuff. So thanks again.
No, thank you.
Really appreciate it. So thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you, Phil. See you again.
If you need support with any of the subjects discussed in this episode, please reach out to Mind on 0300 123 3393 or the Samaritans on 116 123. Your GP can also signpost you to local support services